Welcome back to Uncle Hollow NX. Here, every story is a different kind of darkness, hidden behind the wind and footsteps in the night. Thank you for returning. Now sit down, listen, and let me open a door into a world not meant for the faint of heart. There is a village tucked deep in the countryside of Thailand, where people still whisper about an abandoned house locked shut for decades. They say that anyone bold enough to step inside can never forget the lingering stench of death clinging to its rotting walls. At night, villagers often hear the sound of children's footsteps running in circles and shrill laughter echoing from within, even though the rusted front door has long been chained and locked from the outside. The elders forbid their grandchildren from going near it, for they themselves once witnessed the horror when that house was broken into years ago. It was not just a crime, nor a baseless rumor. This story is real, and it is more terrifying than any nightmare you've ever heard. The story begins almost 30 years ago, when this corner of Thailand was still poor, dirt roads winding around rice fields and mountainsides. Back then, the family of a man named Somchai still lived in a small wooden house. His mother was pregnant with him at the time, while his grandparents worked long hours in the fields. It was during this time that the village grew unsettled over the sudden arrival of strangers. No one knew where they came from. One late afternoon, a middle-aged couple arrived with a little boy, quietly moving into the vacant house at the end of the lane. They carried only a few belongings, some worn wooden chests, a battered motorcycle, and a child no older than 4. The boy immediately drew attention, for his face bore unusual features: drooping eyes, round cheeks, and a mouth that always hung open. The villagers quickly realized he was born with what Thais called the sad angel's illness, a congenital condition that left his mind underdeveloped, recognizable at a glance. At first, people felt pity rather than suspicion. This was a humble community, bound by neighborly kindness. They showed the couple where to trade at the market, pointed out which plots of land could be worked, and even gave them rice and vegetables during the first days. The mother often carried the boy in her arms, her face worn yet softened by a grateful smile. The father spoke little, eyes always lowered, his thin frame wiry but strong. But before long, strange things began to happen. Each morning, the couple rode out of the village on their old motorcycle, always taking the boy with them, and returned only at dusk. They looked exhausted, clothes covered in dust, the child's face red from the sun. When curious neighbors asked, they replied vaguely that they collected discarded hair. It was true. Back then, there were people who made a living going door to door, buying or begging for hair to sell to wig makers. Rare, but not unheard of. The villagers stopped asking questions, only pitying the child who had to endure such harsh days. Then one noon, several villagers passed by the house. The heavy padlock still dangled on the door from the outside, yet through a crack they saw the boy running around inside. He held a bowl, feeding himself happily, and then burst into giggles at the television. They assumed his parents must be nearby and would return soon. But the same scene repeated again and again. The door locked tight, the couple gone, and the boy left alone, living as if he were much older. Rumors spread quickly. Some whispered he was not an ordinary child, but carried an old soul inside. Others muttered that the parents cared nothing for him, but were raising him for some sinister purpose. Whatever the truth, no one dared interfere, for whenever the boy's eyes peered through the metal bars, the villagers felt their blood run cold. It was not the blank stare of a child born with illness. It was the gaze of something aged, heavy, and unspoken. At the time, Somchai's mother was 6 months pregnant. She later recalled that every time she passed by that house, her belly would tighten painfully and the baby inside would thrash wildly, as if desperate to escape. The feeling haunted her, turning each step past that alley into torment. But no one in the village admitted their fear aloud. They only whispered behind closed doors, until a shadow of dread seemed to hang over the entire neighborhood. Soon, another peculiarity appeared. The couple no longer gathered only hair. Months later, they began collecting old wooden furniture, doors, tables, antique wardrobes. Villagers assumed they would repair and resell them. But no, the couple hauled the wood inside, broke it apart, and discarded the pieces carelessly. At times, they threw the splintered remains onto the empty lot the very next day. People stopped seeing them as merely poor. Their odd behavior, combined with the boy's unsettling presence, spread unease through the village. And when some claimed they had seen the couple wandering deep into the forest, carrying hoes and burlap sacks, the fear deepened. They said they weren't gathering firewood at all. They were searching for gold. But there was no proof, only fragments of suspicion. Until one day, all of those fragments came together into a truth more horrifying than anyone could have imagined.
The village where this story takes place was once as peaceful as any other in rural Thailand. Life there was slow and humble, bound tightly by tradition and community. In the rainy season, the rice fields shimmered green, filled with the endless hum of insects. In the dry season, red dust swirled with the wind, clinging to the wooden porches of every home. These small details became the rhythm of daily life, so familiar that even the slightest change was impossible to miss. And then, one unsettling change did arrive on a gray, heavy afternoon of that year. They say the sky that day was neither sunny nor rainy, but covered with a thick blanket of dark clouds. A thin, weary-looking couple appeared at the edge of the village, riding a battered motorcycle that rattled as if it might break in half at any moment. The husband was gaunt, skin tanned dark, eyes sharp but always lowered, avoiding contact. The wife looked exhausted, her frail shoulders clutching a child tightly in her arms. They stopped in front of the abandoned house at the end of the lane, its wooden walls stained, roof tiles sagging, and wild grass growing thick all around. From that day on, the silent house was no longer empty. Villagers saw the couple bring in a few trunks, some bedding, and then shut themselves in, locking the doors tightly. They hardly spoke, offering only a curt nod or a brief greeting when they crossed paths with the locals. The villagers, kind-hearted as they were, simply assumed this was another poor family, strangers seeking a fresh start. But soon, all attention turned to the child they had brought with them. The boy was about 4 years old, frail, with sparse hair. His face bore distinct features that anyone could recognize at a glance: slanted eyes, chubby cheeks drooping downward like a crooked smile, and a small mouth that was almost always open. These were unmistakable traits of Down syndrome. Yet in a poor village 30 decades ago, such an illness was strange and unsettling, often tangled with superstitions and whispers of ill fate. At first, villagers felt pity rather than fear. They sympathized with the couple, poor, displaced, and burdened with raising a sick child. When the mother carried him past the market, vendors would slip her fruit or rice. They thought, at the very least, this family deserved kindness to start anew. But soon, within days of their arrival, strange signs began to show. The boy rarely, if ever, smiled at outsiders. His eyes stared straight and deep in a way that was profoundly unsettling, like the gaze of someone who had lived far too long, not the innocent glance of a 4-year-old. One afternoon, a local woman stopped by to greet them. The boy stood behind the iron bars of the gate, silently watching. She smiled, calling gently, "Come here, little one, I've got candy for you." But the boy did not move, did not blink, only stared with eyes wide open. The woman later swore her blood ran cold, as if she had been judged by something ancient trapped within a young body. Even the family's routine unsettled the villagers. Every morning before sunrise, the couple rode off on their rattling motorcycle, always bringing the boy along. They did not return until dusk, worn down and silent. If asked, the wife only muttered, "Work." The husband said nothing, locking the door tight under the watchful stares of neighbors. What troubled everyone most was that the sickly boy endured the same grueling trips under burning sun, in dust and sudden rainstorms. Some villagers suggested they leave the child at a local daycare, but the mother refused sharply. "I love my son. I can't be apart from him, not even for a moment." Yet what followed did not look like love at all. Weeks passed, and neighbors began to notice something bizarre. On days when the couple was gone, the heavy padlock still hung on the outside of the door. Yet, through cracks in the wood, people saw the boy moving freely inside. He ran circles around the living room, played with odds and ends, and even once sat before the television with a steaming bowl of rice, eating carefully, spoonful by spoonful, like an adult. Not clumsy, not messy. He wiped his mouth, folded his towel neatly, and set the bowl aside. The sight chilled everyone. How could a 4-year-old with Down syndrome cook rice, feed himself properly, and even turn on the television at the right hour? It didn't happen just once, but again and again, each time the parents left. From pity, the villagers shifted to fear. They whispered that something was terribly wrong in that house at the end of the lane. Perhaps the boy was not simply a boy. Perhaps another soul, ancient, cruel, or unspeakable, was living within that frail body. And slowly, suspicion thickened like a storm cloud over the village. The sickly child, once pitied, was now watched with dread, his presence avoided, his home shunned. Parents warned their children not to play near the last house of the lane, yet the mysteries of that family only deepened with time. From the moment they moved in, a strange haze seemed to cling to the house. At first, it was only silence, but then unexplainable things began to emerge, and at the center of it all was the child.
One noon, as the sun stood high and the dirt road lay empty, an elderly neighbor, May, passed by. The padlock still dangled on the outside. The wooden door was slightly ajar, a thin ray of light spilling out. Curious, May peered through. What she saw nearly stopped her heart. The boy sat small on a wooden chair, a steaming bowl of rice before him. He lifted each spoonful carefully, chewing slowly, not spilling a grain. When finished, he wiped his mouth, folded the towel neatly, and placed the bowl back in order. May froze. A 4-year-old child, born sick, behaving with the precision of a grown adult. It was impossible. That night, long after May had blown out her lamps, she lay awake in the dark. From the last house of the lane came the low hum of a television, followed by shrill bursts of laughter, sharp as knives cutting into the silence. She listened closely. It was not the playful laughter of a child. It dragged on, long and distorted, before stopping abruptly as if strangled mid-breath. Trembling, she pulled her blanket over her head, heart pounding. The next day, a village boy came running home pale with fear. He had been playing nearby when he saw the child standing at the window, staring outside. When he walked closer, the boy inside did not move, eyes wide and unblinking, like a living statue. Only when the child fled in panic did the figure finally smile, a crooked, lopsided smile that carried no trace of innocence. Others, too, claimed to see him doing things no 4-year-old could, sweeping the floor, folding laundry, even scraping wood with a knife, face locked in unnatural concentration. One farmer swore he saw the boy standing in the yard, blade in hand, carefully carving at the wooden posts. The sight made his skin crawl. Then came the storm. One evening, thunder shook the sky, rain pouring in sheets. The villagers hurried to shutter their homes. From the last house of the lane came the low hum of a television, followed by shrill bursts of laughter, sharp as knives cutting into the silence. She listened closely. It was not the playful laughter of a child. It dragged on, long and distorted, before stopping abruptly as if strangled mid-breath. Trembling, she pulled her blanket over her head, heart pounding. Somchai's mother, heavy with child at the time, recalled how her unborn baby would thrash violently each time she passed by. Her belly would harden, pain stabbing so sharp she had to stop and catch her breath. She believed the baby within her was reacting to the unseen darkness radiating from that place. Worse still, many nights, villagers heard knocks echoing faintly from inside. 3 short taps, then 1 long, like someone striking a coin on a wooden table, sharp, hollow, and then silence. By morning, the lock was always intact. The whispers thickened. People stopped calling the child by name. They spoke only in vague words. The boy at the end of the lane. Some swore they saw 2 children at once, one standing at the porch, the other running in the yard. But when they blinked, only one remained. Each strange detail piled upon another, day after day, until the family became a looming shadow over the entire village. And at the heart of that shadow was the boy. His aged eyes, his unnatural habits, and the crooked smile that haunted the marrow of every soul who saw it.
As time passed, while rumors about the boy grew thicker, the villagers began paying closer attention to the couple's strange trade. They spoke little, always brushing off questions, but their actions could not be hidden. At first, they claimed they traveled from village to village buying fallen hair. Indeed, people often saw them returning with large sacks filled with tangled, dusty strands, some clumped together with sweat, giving off a pungent, sickly odor. The villagers frowned but said nothing. It was a degrading trade, yes, but hardship forced people into all kinds of work. No one mocked them. But only a short time later they changed their trade. Instead of hair, they began collecting old wooden furniture, broken tables, rotting cabinets, splintered doors. Anyone with discarded pieces could sell them for a small price, and at first villagers welcomed it as a way to clear their homes. Yet what happened next was baffling. The wood was never repaired, never resold. Instead, the couple smashed it apart, splinter by splinter, and tossed the remains in their yard. Perfectly usable planks were hacked into pieces, burned halfway, sending up clouds of black smoke that hung over the neighborhood, heavy and suffocating. Sometimes villagers peered into the yard and saw the couple working, not fixing, not trading, but arranging. They split the wood and stacked it into bizarre shapes, setting the pieces alongside the bags of tangled hair. On one occasion, someone swore they saw carvings etched into a plank, lines twisting into symbols like ancient writing. No one could read it, but everyone shivered at the sight. Soon they stopped collecting from the village altogether. Instead, each morning before dawn, the couple disappeared westward into the deep forest. Their rusted motorcycle carried picks, shovels, and heavy sacks. The boy always came with them, wedged between the two, his face still and cold as stone. They did not return until late in the night, carrying bulging bundles or cradling something wrapped tightly in red cloth. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed they were digging for gold. Others whispered that they were desecrating ancient graves, exhuming bones for dark rituals. Fear escalated when a villager named Preacha swore he had seen them himself, At dusk, deep in the woods, he heard the clang of a pickaxe striking earth, the heavy scrape of a shovel, and the woman murmuring prayers under her breath. When he crept closer, both turned suddenly, eyes gleaming in the dark. Terrified, Preacher fled and swore never to enter the forest at twilight again. Stories multiplied. Villagers said the couple dragged back sacks that jingled with the sound of metal. Others swore the red-wrapped object glowed faintly under the moon. No one dared to verify, but the fear was real. The couple's demeanor changed as well. Once humble and quiet, they now greeted curiosity with dagger-like stares. The woman sometimes broke into crooked laughter, a twisted sound that froze blood. The man grew gaunter, his hands calloused and smeared with dirt, and sometimes with what looked like dried blood.
One stormy night, the villagers heard banging from the last house of the lane, mixed with the sound of a child wailing, a cry so sharp it seemed to tear the night apart. No one stepped outside, but in the morning muddy drag marks led from the road into their home, as if something heavy had been pulled inside. From then on, the villagers no longer saw them as desperate outsiders. The couple radiated something dark, something unholy. Their trade was no trade at all, but a ritual, an ongoing preparation for something unspeakable. Hair, broken wood, the secret red-wrapped objects, all were pieces of a larger, dreadful design. Fear tightened its grip on the village. People stopped giving them anything. Children were forbidden to go near the house, and deep down, everyone knew. It was only a matter of time before the secret was revealed. And when it was, it would not be something ordinary. The rumors thickened until they infected every meal, every night's sleep. What began as whispers became testimony, sightings, moments no one could dismiss. Suspicion became obsession, and obsession became terror. One late afternoon, under the blood-red light of sunset, a group of young men entered the forest to collect firewood. There they stumbled upon the couple at the roots of an ancient tree. The husband hacked at the soil, each blow ringing sharp, while the wife shoveled, pausing often to glare around with piercing eyes. Something glinted in the dirt beneath them. Then one of the boys slipped, snapping a twig. In an instant, the couple spun around, eyes blazing. The boys didn't wait to see more. They bolted, hearts pounding, fleeing back to the village pale as death. That night, the tale of digging for gold took on new life. Days later, a woman swore she saw them carrying something massive from the forest, wrapped tightly in red cloth. It was so heavy they had to haul it together, dragging it into their house and locking the door. By moonlight, the red fabric shimmered faintly, as though the object itself was glowing, a glow that was both alluring and horrifying. She insisted it wasn't wood, but something alive, heavy, filled with secrets. Villagers whispered now of dark sorcery. Some said the couple was raising a cursed child for sacrifice, feeding their rituals with hair, wood, and whatever lay within the red cloth. Elders muttered about ancient black magic, that human hair could be used to craft spirit dolls, that wooden altars were needed for rituals, and at the center of it all was the boy. His strange eyes, his crooked smiles, his unsettling presence. By now, the weight of fear had changed the village. Each evening, the road past the last house fell silent. Children were dragged away before dusk. Adults walked long detours. The rotting wooden house, once forgotten, had become a monument of terror. Then came the breaking point. One night, the entire family vanished. The house stood locked, silent. Days passed with no sign of their return. By the third day, fear mixed with burning curiosity, and on the fourth, when the stench of rot seeped from within, the villagers made a fateful choice. They broke the door. None of them knew that by doing so, they were about to uncover the most horrifying scene their village had ever witnessed, a truth darker than every whisper, every rumor, every nightmare.
The rotten wooden door of the last house on the lane burst open with a heavy kick. The rusted hinges cracked and snapped, releasing a wave of stench so foul that those closest to the entrance immediately gagged and covered their noses. The smell was sickening, a mix of burnt hair, rotting wood, and decomposing flesh. A few retched, others turned away trembling, but curiosity mixed with fear pushed them inside. Fading daylight filtered through the grimy windows, illuminating the chaos within. The entire house was filled with sacks of tangled hair piled like mountains. Strands clung to the walls and scattered across broken planks, the dark, suffocating room crawling with dread. Every step stirred up clouds of hair, clinging to skin like invisible needles. In the corner stood a makeshift altar built from old timber. Burnt incense sticks leaned over melted candles, wax dripping in crimson streams like congealed blood. And there, at the very center, lay something that froze every heart in the room. A small body, wrapped tightly in red cloth. A trembling man stepped forward, hand shaking, as he pulled at the cloth. The crowd behind him screamed in unison. Inside was the corpse of a child. Its face was bruised purple, eyes wide open, the whites clouded and milky. The mouth hung ajar, revealing crooked baby teeth, lips stained with dried black blood. The tiny body was curled, its skin stretched tight as though it had been submerged in water for days. Worse still, its arms and stomach bore gnawed wounds, with maggots writhing and dropping onto the wooden floor. Women shrieked. An old woman clutched her chest and collapsed, whispering prayers. The crowd erupted in chaos. Some fled for the door, others stood frozen in horror. None could believe what they were seeing. Whispers cut through the air. "That's the Bori, the one with Down syndrome, their child." But another voice shook with denial. "No, it doesn't look the same. It's different, as if it's become something else." The air thickened, heavy and suffocating. Flies buzzed around the corpse, their droning merging with the frantic footsteps of the villagers. Shadows stretched across the walls, flickering in the candlelight like dozens of unseen eyes watching. Beside the altar, a wooden chest sat ajar. Curious hands peeked inside and recoiled in terror. There was no gold, no treasure, only more red cloths, more carved wooden planks etched with grotesque symbols. Some were stained with dried blood, the metallic stench choking the air. On the lid of the chest, a crooked circle was carved, an eye-like mark at its center, lines branching outward like a web. A sudden gust rushed through the shattered window, scattering incense smoke into a swirling shape. For a split second, it seemed to form a child's grinning face. The crowd screamed and bolted from the house. Yet a few stood rooted in place, eyes locked on the corpse's dead, unblinking stare, as though hypnotized.
That night, the entire village sank into mourning. Everyone knew they had stumbled upon a ritual, one steeped in ancient black magic. The child's body, the heaps of hair, the carved wood, they all pointed to one truth. The couple had sacrificed their own child in a ritual of infant sorcery. And what they sought was not wealth, but a dark power beyond human grasp. From the moment the door was broken, doubt was erased. Fear became absolute. What once were whispers had become a reality too dreadful to deny. In the days that followed, the tales spread like wildfire. Villagers no longer debated their strange trade. They now spoke only of the cursed practice, calling it by a single name: infant sorcery. At first, it was just gossip whispered in the market,
But soon, elders revived half-forgotten stories. Dark shamans who used the corpses of infants to trap wandering souls, binding them with hair, sealing them into wooden altars. These souls, enslaved, could be commanded to bring fortune, to curse enemies, to dig out hidden gold. But the price was eternal. The spirits clung to the one who bound them, never letting go, dragging them into damnation. And now the villagers were certain that was exactly what they had witnessed. From that day forward, no one dared approach the house. Though abandoned, its broken door gaping, the villagers avoided it as though it were cursed ground. At night, when the wind blew through its cracks, the creak of rotting wood was enough to convince them the child's spirit still lingered. Children were forbidden from even speaking of it, yet curiosity gnawed at them. They swore they saw a small figure darting past the windows. One claimed he heard knocking, 3 short taps, 1 long, beneath his bed at night. When he looked down, he found clumps of wet, matted hair, freshly placed. The tales spread beyond the village. Neighbors whispered of the infant sorcery at the end of the lane. They said that if the spirit was not properly fed, it would grow restless, crying, laughing, and hunting down those who had seen it. Fear suffocated the village. Some families fled, abandoning their homes. Others left offerings at the cursed house, incense, fruit, prayers, pleading with the spirit for mercy. Yet the unease only grew heavier. One old woman swore the child appeared in her dreams, standing at the foot of her bed. Half in shadow, its tiny face mouthed words without sound. Each time she awoke, the stench of burnt hair clung to her room. The couple was never seen again. No one knew if they were dead or alive. The only thing that remained was the image of that small body wrapped in red cloth, and the unshakable belief that infant sorcery had been born in their village. From that moment, the peaceful village was never the same. No matter how many years passed, the last house on the lane stood as a cursed monument. Its roof collapsed, weeds choking its walls. But to the villagers, it was more than a ruin. It was the cradle of black magic, the restless home of a child's soul that would never find peace.
After the rumor of infant sorcery spread, the village sank into a heavy, suffocating atmosphere. People who once lived quietly with nothing but their fields were now haunted by an invisible fear. But strangely, instead of avoiding the cursed house, some began to visit it, not to banish the spirit, but to beg for luck. The first was a notorious gambler. He had heard whispers that the sacrificed child could reveal winning numbers if offered the right gifts. One night, under the pale moon, he brought incense, betel leaves, and a boiled chicken to the abandoned house. Kneeling before the door, his voice trembled. "I mean no harm. Please, little soul, grant me a number. Help me change my fate." The next morning, he actually won a small lottery prize. News spread like wildfire. Soon others followed. They offered incense, red candles, even milk and candy for the child's spirit. Some swore they too won money. And so belief in the cursed altar grew deeper. The villagers named it the Wishing Shrine, a place where one could toss the carved wooden pieces left in the chest and wait for the spirit's answer. Strangely, at first, many did win, but the victories never lasted. One man who struck it rich overnight soon lost his mind. He claimed he heard a child calling his name every night, laughter trailing him everywhere, Even with his ears stuffed, the voices remained. Days later, he was found dead, eyes bulging, mouth frozen wide, his body twisted as if strangled. Beneath his bed lay clumps of soaking wet hair, reeking of rot. A woman who once begged for numbers also met her fate. After a few small wins, she was plagued by nightmares. Every night she saw a child crouched at the end of her bed, its face torn between a smile and a sob, holding out bloodied hands. Within a week, her body wasted away as if drained of life. Doctors found no cause. Villagers whispered, "The infant's sorcery has come to collect its debt." Slowly, they understood. The winning numbers were nothing but bait. Anyone greedy enough to accept them would pay a price far heavier than gold. On stormy nights, those passing the abandoned house swore they heard the sound of dice or wooden blocks clattering on the floor, followed by the giggles and cries of a child. Yet no one was inside. Fear reached its peak. No one dared approach the wishing shrine anymore. Yet it remained, as if the child's spirit demanded it. The village lived under its shadow, day by day. At night, with the wind howling and the moonlight spilling over the broken roof, some claimed they heard whispers. "Come back. Cast again. I'll give you numbers. Change your fate." The wishing shrine became part of the village's legend. Children grew up terrified, the old lived in dread. No one spoke openly, but all knew the spirit of that child would never rest, and its hunger would never end.
Years passed. The last house on the lane collapsed into ruin, swallowed by weeds. People thought time would bury the horror, but fear lingers. It breathes in their stories, in restless dreams. And then one day it returned, beginning with a boy named Niron. He was 8, the only son of a family living near the eastern fields, bright, playful, beloved, until one fateful afternoon when curiosity drew him to the abandoned house. Peeking through a broken board, he swore he saw a child standing in the corner, small, dark eyes, a crooked grin. When he blinked, it was gone. From that night, nightmares began. He woke screaming, insisting, "It's standing there, at the end of my bed!" His parents rushed in, only to find him drenched in sweat, staring into the void. Some nights, tiny footsteps echoed around the house, but when the lights came on, no one was there. Niron changed. Once lively, he grew quiet, withdrawn. He sat for hours in silence, sometimes whispering as if to someone unseen. When his mother asked, he replied calmly, "I'm talking to my friend. He says not to be afraid. He was locked inside that house too." Her blood ran cold. Everyone knew what lingered there. One morning, his teacher discovered a wet, foul-smelling clump of tangled hair in his school bag. When questioned, Niron only smiled. "My friend gave it to me, for luck." But when his parents checked, the hair was gone, vanished. The boy drifted deeper under the shadow. Villagers often saw him sitting before the ruined house, softly humming an old nursery rhyme no one recognized. The melody was eerie, chilling even for adults. When dragged home, he only grinned, the same crooked smile as the child from the legend. Rumors spread. The infant sorcery had chosen him. It had taken root in his body. The elders begged the family to send him far away, but hesitation cost them dearly. One night, screams shattered the quiet. Villagers rushed to Niron's home. Inside, the boy sat in the middle of his room, furniture overturned, eyes hollow, muttering, "I won't let them leave me. I won't let them abandon me again." In his hand was a knife. His father barely wrenched it away. But what chilled everyone most were the fresh bruises on Niron's arms, tiny handprints as small as a child's pressed deep into his flesh. The village knew then the spirit had found its vessel. From that night on, Niron was no longer the same. Though alive, his gaze wandered, his smile twisted. Sometimes he erupted in shrill, childlike laughter in the dead of night. The villagers pitied him, but they also feared him, because they all understood the curse had passed on. The infant sorcery would live again through Niron.
From the day Niron changed, his family lived in constant unease. His parents, burdened with fear and helplessness, left much of his care to his grandmother. She loved him more than life itself, believing that through prayer and devotion she could shield him from the dark force encircling him. By day, she led him around the yard, softly reciting Buddhist chants. She whispered, "Don't listen to the voices, my child. Only listen to me. I will never leave you." Niron often nodded, but his distant eyes seemed fixed on someone she could not see. At night she laid beside him, ready to embrace him when the nightmares came. His mother often wept, but the grandmother insisted, "It's just night terrors. Leave him with me. This will pass." But soon, strange things began happening to her. It started with dreams. She saw a pale child with thin hair sitting at her bedside, grinning crookedly. When she reached to push it away, her hand met a chill like iron. She awoke in terror, the sound of laughter echoing in her ears. Some nights she felt a small body crawl onto her chest, pressing down so heavily she could barely breathe. Opening her eyes, she saw a hunched shadow, face ashen, leaning close. Only when she gasped out prayers and someone switched on the light did the figure vanish. Her health declined quickly. She shivered even in the summer heat. Bruises bloomed across her arms and neck, tiny handprints, as if a child clung to her skin. The family begged her to rest, but she refused to leave Niron's side. She believed that if she abandoned him, the spirit would claim him completely. One evening at dusk, neighbors saw her rocking Niron on the porch, softly singing a lullaby, but the melody was unfamiliar. Slow, mournful, heavy like a distant wail. Niron's lips moved faintly, echoing the tune. The neighbors shuddered. That night, the sound of knocking, tock, 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 rattled the house. Niron's parents rushed in. They found the grandmother sitting rigid on the floor, clutching her grandson. Niron slept peacefully, his cheeks flushed as if newly alive. But the old woman's body stiffened, lips blue, breath fading. Desperate, they carried her to the village shaman. He only shook his head. "The grandmother has taken the curse upon herself. The spirit has not left. It has only shifted. This is the price. Once begun, it cannot be undone." And indeed, after that night, Niron grew stronger. His nightmares waned, but the grandmother withered. She muttered to herself, eyes vacant, sometimes weeping, sometimes laughing. In the dark, she clawed her own arms raw, whispering, "Don't leave me. I won't let anyone leave you again." Until one rainy night, the family heard noises in the yard and found her sitting in a puddle, clutching a fistful of wet, tangled hair. Her eyes stared wide at the sky. Beside her stood Niron, silent, murmuring, "Grandma took my place. She promised."
By morning, she was gone. Officially, they said heart failure, old age, but everyone in the village knew
She had sacrificed herself, bearing the curse meant for her grandson. From then on, the memory of an old woman crooning lullabies in the night became a haunting symbol. Her love was immense, but it had carved a path for the infant sorcery to endure, rooting itself deeper into her bloodline. After her death, grief and dread swallowed the village. The funeral was simple, yet nearly everyone came, not only to mourn her, but to shiver at the belief she had carried part of the curse away with her. But shadows lingered, they only shifted shape. Niron appeared healthy again, laughing, playing like other children. His parents sighed in relief, convinced the horror was buried with the old woman, but the sharp-eyed villagers saw otherwise. At times, his smile twisted unnaturally, crooked just like the child from the cursed house. On moonlit nights, some swore they glimpsed him standing near the ruins, staring silently at the broken walls. The family clung to hope, but invisible hands still moved within their lives. Knocking sounds haunted the nights, toys rearranged themselves into strange numbers. His mother prayed desperately, clutching him close. Yet Niron's eyes seemed fixed far away, listening to an unseen friend. The ruined house at the end of the lane rotted further, but none dared destroy it. They feared releasing whatever was bound inside. So it stood like a scar, a permanent wound on the land. Children grew up forbidden to go near, forbidden to speak of the infant sorcery, but curiosity burned. Dares were made. Those who ventured close always returned trembling, swearing they heard a whisper in the dark. "Come closer, play with me."
Years passed. The village thinned. Families fled, leaving fields abandoned. Houses crumbled one by one. But the cursed house still stood, solitary, its windows watching. Travelers who passed by felt a chill, as if eyes peered out from the shadows, smiling that same crooked smile. They called it the Bound Village, a place no one wished to stay, heavy with a curse too deep to escape. Even as people scattered far away, the tale endured. They told their children of the sacrificed child, the laughter in the rain, the grandmother's tragic devotion. And they passed down a warning. The infant sorcery never dies. It only changes its shape, changes its vessel. Once you look into its eyes, you are bound forever. And so, the story ends. No one knows if the spirit lingers in the village or if it followed those who fled. But whenever night falls, the sound of tock, tock, tock echoes in memory, reminding us that some darkness never sleeps. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoy haunting, emotional tales with a lingering aftertaste, don't forget to like, share, and hit the bell. I post a new story every week. I'll see you in the next one.